Two significant results followed the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act. First, settlers rushed into Kansas to influence the vote on the slavery question. This influx led to outbreaks of violence and death, eventually known as Bleeding Kansas. Second, the Kansas-Nebraska Act caused a schism within the Democratic Party and concurrently led to a coalition of divergent interests under the umbrella of the new Republican Party. Northern Democrats were severely beaten in the 1854 congressional elections, leaving the southern wing of the party in control. Between 1854 and 1856, the Democrats became a sectional party. Furthermore, it became impossible for Southern Whigs to stay in a party dominated by anti-slavery Northerners. The Democratic Party of the South was becoming a cultural tribe, a tribe held together by blind loyalty. The substance of the debate on slavery did not matter. If a Southern Democrat was willing to work towards a compromise with Northerners, he could not do so as a Democrat. He had to become a know-nothing or a member of the Constitutional Union Party. The Republican Party had formed in 1854 on an ideological foundation of free labor. The party had a big tent. They saw their anti-slavery program as part of a more significant movement from the absolutism and aristocracy of the old world to the democracy and equality of the new world. Republicans viewed the South as an obstacle to the country's material progress. Free labor recognized the North's superior social system, a dynamic and fluid economy that offered opportunity and dignity to all men. Former Whigs, anti-Nebraska Democrats, Free Soilers, Know-Nothings, and Liberty Party men formed the Republican coalition. Finally, and most importantly, Republicans looked upon the fugitive slave law, nullification, the maintenance of slavery in Washington, D.C., and the Kansas-Nebraska Act as part of a slave power conspiracy to control the federal government and the future direction of the country. Hi, I'm Tom Army. Welcome to U.S. History Online and Part 6 of Causes of the Civil War, the Slave Power Conspiracy. From 1854 to 1856, the sectional gap widened between Southern Democrats and the nascent Republican Party. Politics was polarized. It was the slave power conspiracy versus Northern aggression. 4 years before the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, John C. Calhoun spoke to the U.S. Senate about the reasons Southerners should oppose the Compromise of 1850, debates during the Missouri Compromise of 1820, the war with Mexico, the formation of the Kansas-Nebraska territories, proved that Northerners wanted to deprive Southerners of their equality in the Union and the new territories. Now in 1855, Southerners saw Calhoun's words as coming true. The North provoked the South with abolitionists promoting servile insurrection. Northern politicians would not censor these radicals. According to Southerners, the North had encroached upon Southern rights to their property and had failed to shut down the Underground Railroad. The country was heading towards a crisis for which Southerners would blame the North. Yet, with the collapse of the Whig Party, Southern Democrats could stake their claim as the most influential voice in national politics. A coalition, however, of smaller anti-slavery parties under the banner of one party would threaten Southern power. The new Republican Party alliance in the North presented a danger to the South. The year 1855, however, almost derailed this Northern anti-slavery coalition. A resurgent anti-immigrant movement briefly took advantage of the Whig collapse and nearly stole the energy of the anti-administration forces. It did this by channeling its frustrations into fights against Catholic, German, and Irish immigrants in American cities. The first manifestation of the Nativist movement began as part of the temperance movement. They called themselves know-nothings because they pretended ignorance when asked about their activities, especially when they burned a convent in Charlestown, Massachusetts in 1834. The Know-Nothing, or American Party, made impressive gains in 1854 and 1855, particularly in New England and the Middle Atlantic states. In 1854, the party gained control of all but 3 of the 400 seats in the Massachusetts legislature, and the legislature would consequently deport 15,000 immigrants. Protestant men from the middle and working classes dominated the movement. Many party members believed the wild rumors that Irish bishops, obedient to the Pope, would soon control the nation. Also, in the fall elections of 1854, with anger over the Kansas-Nebraska Act, anti-Nebraska candidates unseated dozens of Northern Democrats in the U.S. House of Representatives. The anti-Nebraska forces would enjoy a majority of at least 10 votes in the House. But it was a shaky coalition at best. Whigs and Democrats remained bitterly at odds over economic issues like tariffs and funding for internal improvements. Furthermore, the American Party won 52 congressional seats, and most opposed the extension of slavery. But many ex-Whigs and ex-Democrats loathed the Nativists. These divisions set the stage for the most contentious and protracted debate in U.S. history over who would be the next Speaker of the House. 2 months and 133 ballots later, Nathaniel Banks of Massachusetts was finally elected. The nascent Republican Party had come to Washington determined to stop the spread of chattel slavery. At this time, however, the anti-slavery coalition was still ad interim until the party could reconcile its several factions. Surprisingly, a Southerner would advance that reconciliation 3 months after Banks's election. In a monumental effort that took 5 hours over 2 days, Senator Charles Sumner of Massachusetts delivered his now famous Crime Against Kansas speech on May 19th and 20th. Joanne B. Freeman pointed out in her book, Field of Blood, Violence in Congress and the Road to Civil War, that the senator's address was biting, defiant, and filled with sexual innuendo about slaveholders and their love of slavery. Sumner aimed his speech at several senators who had attacked him during the Kansas-Nebraska debate. One senator, Andrew Butler, a Democrat from South Carolina, received an extraordinarily irritating blow. Mocking Butler as a chivalrous man, Sumner charged him with taking a mistress who, though ugly to others, is always lovely to him. Though polluted in the sight of the world, is chaste in his sight. I mean, the harlot slavery. Butler was not in the chamber when Sumner delivered his vitriolic comments, but his relative, Congressman Preston Brooks of South Carolina, read the speech. Brooks decided he would not challenge Sumner to a duel because dueling was for gentlemen of equal social standing. Instead, he chose to beat Sumner. Brooks walked into the Senate chamber, cane in hand, on May 22nd. He moved close to Sumner, who was seated at his desk, franking copies of his Kansas speech for mailing. When he reached the desk, Brooks said, "Mr. Sumner, I read your speech with care and much impartiality as was possible, and I felt it was my duty to tell you that you have libeled my state and slandered a relative who is aged and absent, and I am come to punish you for it." At that, he raised his cane and beat Sumner over the head, striking him over a dozen times until his club shattered. Brooks' friend, Representative Lawrence M. Kett, also of South Carolina, stood by with gun in hand to prevent anyone from coming to Sumner's aid. Eventually, Sumner was carried out of the chamber, barely conscious. The beating nearly killed Sumner, but it served the anti-slavery cause. On May 21st, the town of Lawrence, Kansas, founded by anti-slavery settlers, had been ransacked by pro-slavery forces. Now Sumner had been brutally attacked. The New York Times sold 90,000 copies of Sumner's speech within a month. Southern papers defended the beating. Sumner's speech was an outrage. Northern aggression was out of control. Threats of violent confrontations continued throughout the remainder of the legislative session. Moreover, what started as an ad hoc coalition of forces to oppose slavery's expansion now fully formed as the Republican Party. For the first time in the party's history, they would nominate a presidential candidate. The presidential election of 1856 would only intensify and broaden the country's political divide. Politicians drew ideological battle lines more clearly. Where each side killed compromise, soon they would be killing people.